Hi, everyone. My name is Barbara Spiecker. I'm a marine ecologist, and I'm also an educator. For this presentation today, I plan to explain a bit about my journey getting to where I am. Maybe you've seen the movie Finding Nemo, that story about the father, Merlin, who's always looking, different adventures and seeking his son Nemo. So that journey is something that resonates with me because of my life's career path that I took. Sometimes I felt I was finding Barbara, and maybe other people have felt the same way. I want to start explaining about where I grew up. I grew up in Rochester, New York. I don't know if you're familiar with Rochester, but it's one of several cities with a very large deaf population there. And over 50,000 deaf people reside in Rochester. Here it is on a map. A little bit more about me. You may have figured out by now, I am a deaf person and I communicate using American Sign Language, ASL, we call it. And just to give you a little context about my family and my background is I grew up in a deaf family. Both my parents are deaf. You can see this family tree image over here. I'm just freezing up, sorry. I have my cursor over Um, in one corner, those are my parents. At the bottom is me with my two brothers, who are my two brothers. And you can see my aunt and uncle as well as you can see the rest of my family who I with the red dots, and those are hearing members of my family. I grew up going to a school for the deaf called Rochester School for the Deaf. I also went to a traditional public school, so I spent half a day in the morning going to what we call a mainstream program or a school, a traditional school, and then the rest of the day I'd spend at Rochester School for the Deaf. Growing up in Rochester was really nice. My next step was to graduate high school and then to decide what college I wanted to go to. And I chose a college called Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT. And then they also have a smaller sub college called NTID, National Technical Institute for the Deaf. That is a college where they provide a lot of services for deaf students who attend. I envision myself being a history major since I love history, but as I proceeded on in my journey, I realized now back in that time, I realized history might not be the best choice for me because I felt like maybe there wouldn't be a lot of job opportunities for me. So I made the decision to switch my major to biology. Not really because I was in love with biology, but in high school, I got an A in biology and thought, hey, maybe I'll give it a try. I seem to take to biology. Let's see what happens. Okay. So my first 2 years in college were, yeah, a struggle, I should say. I mean, I barely passed my classes. And at the time I thought maybe biology isn't a good fit for me. But luckily, RIT got some funding opportunities where they were able to foster the research experience for students. I thought I'd try research. And this was a good match for me. I had a mentor that really changed my career path completely. A great mentor can be amazing. They helped me during that program. I focused on brittle sea stars, and how they develop the developmental path they follow for growing from a cell to a full-grown organism. That is what my project focused on. On the left, you see a grid of pictures. These are cells dividing and dividing and replicating and dividing and growing to become what we know to be the brittle star. That research experience was really cool. And I thought, okay, maybe I can do biology after all. So, biology is a really broad field. I just kind of had to figure out where I wanted to focus. Did I want to work with people in healthcare environments? Or, I decided to try a summer internship at a hospital to see if I liked that. I worked within the deaf community, surveying and seeing how much people have access to healthcare and healthcare information. And I did different events, educational events, to teach people about health and healthcare and how to take care of themselves. It was a super fun experience, but I did realize maybe working with people was not really my thing. So I thought, let's try something else. So I started working at a zoo. I worked with terrestrial organisms. As you can see, there are several here that I worked with and cared for. And my job included every morning I would go in and do the feedings. I would prepare their food. I would clean their cages or closures, I should say. I cleaned their closures and I developed different activities to keep the organisms busy. We didn't want them to be bored in their enclosures. That was really fun. My favorite animal to work with was the golden lion,
Golden lion
tamarin,
tamarin.
tamarin at the bottom. The golden lion tamarin at the bottom, right. That's because we share the same hair color. I gotta say, I was biased, but not just that. They're really cute. They're petite. They're very friendly. They'll sit on your shoulder. They love to eat grapes, so I loved feeding them grapes. And the job itself was really fun too. But then I started to feel, okay, those are terrestrial land animals, but maybe I want to work with ocean animals. So I decided to study abroad. I went to an island called Turks and Caicos. And on the island of Turks and Caicos, I focused a lot on diving underwater, where we were studying different marine life underwater. As an example, you can see on the left picture, you can see a sea turtle. And I was monitoring their movements and their migration patterns. The way we would capture sea turtles to do our research, I'll show you in the next slide, or with this picture, you can see we had a boat and it had rope attached to the back of the boat with a board where people would hold on to the board as the boat was moving with the snorkel gear on. As the boat was moving, it would pull you. And we would hold on to the board with our feet underwater. And if we saw any sea turtles, we would let go of the board and just grab the sea turtle from the water and then bring it onto the boat. We would then do blood samples and then release back into the water. What many people don't realize is sea turtles move really fast. And if you're too slow with the grab, you've missed them completely. So sea turtles we surveyed. We also studied marine reserves, which means we had specific areas of the ocean where no fishing was allowed. These were protected for the plant life and the animal life that lived within these reserves to let them grow and thrive within these environments. So we could swim in, dive into these areas, count how many plants there were, how many animals of certain species there were. If there was no fishing allowed in these reserve areas, we wanted to know, were these animals growing by number and population in these reserves? So we were also studying climate change. For coral reefs specifically, we were seeing coral reefs die because of a change in temperature. The temperature was rising in the water and it was affecting how coral reef was growing. We wanted to help them grow by building concrete enclaves where we would bring them into these water environments. The coral could attach themselves to the concrete there and grow. It would give them some physical structure to attach to, which is something that they need. Upon completion of my college at RIT, I decided I wanted to do marine biology for my career. And then I decided to go to grad school or my master's degree. I applied and I struggled. I didn't get accepted into a program, which bummed me out. So I took a year off and I decided to get more research experience and beef up my experience background. So I went to Belize and I went to the Cayman Islands, which are south of Florida on a map. And you can see over here pictures of where I studied. I did a lot of research, a lot of diving, and these are a lot of these pictures show a lot of the organisms. These are pictures I took maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. Camera technology wasn't what it was today, but I still saw some really cool stuff underwater, as you can see. I saw sea turtles. I saw jellyfish. I see sea anemones. What else did I see? At the bottom, you see a picture of something that looks like a yellow white cylindrical thing. It's called a Christmas tree worm. Really cute, really, really small organism. It is a worm, but it looks like a Christmas tree. And if you touch it, it hides into itself. It crawls into itself. And when it feels safe again, it comes out again. You got asked earlier what your favorite organism was, and I'd like to share what mine is. Mine is the parrotfish. You can see it here next to the jellyfish. It's on the right there. The parrotfish is my favorite because it's just a cool creature. It eats kelp. Oh no, it eats algae. Sorry, it eats algae. As algae grows on coral, they will eat this kelp, this algae, and at the same time might get a little bit, a chunk of coral, for example, and ingest some coral. They can digest it, break it down, and when they poop it out, it's sand. So they're really just producing sand, which is amazing. It's a recycling system that they are able to do. So when you're on the beach, a lot of that sand there is really just coming from this fish eating chunks of coral and creating sand. About 2,000 pounds of sand are produced by one organism. So that makes them one of my favorite marine organisms, that function alone. So after that year off with research, I decided to apply again for grad school. And I was able to get into Northeastern University in Boston. That program was pretty unique in that each semester you would travel to a different place or a different location to study the specific ecosystem in that location. So for the first semester, we went to Boston. And the ecosystem there is called a rocky intertidal system. This is where I studied for my first semester. I took classes, we did research, and at the top, you can see this is Maine. Far north, it's near Canada, the border of Canada, but there's a lot of marine life there, amazing marine life. So we learned how to dive and do science and research and figured out how to put on gear, how to dive into these specific systems, keep your balance while you're doing your research. Yeah. Underwater in Boston, you might wonder what that looks like. Well, here's a picture of what I saw underwater in Boston. You can see some crabs, hermit crabs, sea stars. Yeah. The following semester, we traveled to Panama, where we studied coral reef. That whole part of my time there, I was underwater. You can see what I looked like. This is what I looked like every day, all day, every day. We were just underwater. You notice the water's very different there than Boston. Boston water's really green, um, and it feels a little bit of turbidity or murky, but you can see the water quality in Panama was really blue and clear. So you might have wondered what I was doing in Panama. We were researching a lot of different things. We were studying coral reefs, and they have a natural bacteria that they grow inside of them. It's natural, and some of the bacteria is good and some of it's bad, but the bad bacteria is usually very small in amount and not harmful to the coral. But with climate change and raising water temperature, water's getting warmer, those coral reef with the bad bacteria loves the warm water and grows really quickly. and in abundance. And as it grows too quickly in abundance, it becomes harmful to the coral and can even kill them. The coral then can turn white, as you can see in the images. But one really cool thing at the top, you can see the bright green color. That's fluorescent dye. And you might wonder what the purpose of that is. We wanted to see how sponge eat. And so what we would do is put some dye in the surrounding water around the sponge and then watch how the sponge itself naturally pulled in water, filtered it, ate what it wanted, and then the water would push out of the sponge upwards, as you can see. We could then see the direction of the water coming out of the sponge with the green dye or the fluorescent dye. At the bottom, you know, when you go to a dentist and you have a dentist appointment to do a regular cleaning, this is basically what we were doing underwater. You might look at the picture carefully and see something, a small fish inside. Well, there's an eel on the left, and you see inside the mouth of the eel, and similar in other images. So what that little fish does, it likes the specific rocky system where it lives, but I guess you could call it a dentist office for these eels because they stay there, and other animals like sea turtles and eels and fish will come drive by, let's say, these little dentist offices, open their mouths, and these little fish will enter and clean their teeth. And all the leftover food or different things that are caught up in their mouth get cleaned out because these bigger animals need it and then they just swim off. So it's really an amazing system and an amazing function. The last semester, we went to the University of Washington where we studied kelp forests. And you might wonder what organisms are there. Larger marine mammals, seabirds, you can see sea otters, orca, a lot of different larger marine mammals. We also studied their migrations and what the population was, how big, how small, and what they were feeding on. Sorry, wrong slide. I just wanted to show you the kelp forest. It's pretty famous in the Northwest. They really are like giant land forests, but underwater. They grow really tall. They can grow 2 feet up to 2 feet every day. So they grow exponentially fast and tall. My master's degree completed, I then applied for a PhD program and I got accepted, but there was a 6-month gap in time. So I decided I lived in Boston, and maybe you're aware, Boston has a New England aquarium, which I loved going to and really enjoyed going there. So then I thought, well, I like going there enough. Maybe I should try to work there. So you can see this is me in one of the tanks. That my job was to dive into the tanks, feed the fish, interact with people outside of the glass while doing that. And you can see me inside in the tank, and that's a friend of mine outside. If you haven't been there yet, I suggest you go. This is what it looks like. On the left, there's a giant tank, and people just walk around it. They can walk around it, and then they walk around and up to the top of the tank. And then from the top, you can look down into the tank. I would every day go to the top of the tank and then bring food like,
Octopus tentacles.
oh, sorry, yeah, octopus tentacles. And we would feed the fish with the smaller mouths. And then the bigger fish, we would feed shrimp or small fish. I'm going to show you a short video just to give you an idea of what that looked like. It's a kind of old fuzzy video, so I apologize for the quality ahead of time. And that's me inside of the tank. You can see I have a yellow bucket inside are small shrimp. And my job was to try to make sure I was trying to feed specific fish, not just throwing it out willy-nilly, because I wanted to make sure every fish was getting enough food. So when I was feeding the stingrays, they feel very soft, almost like a pancake. And they would come and eat the food, and they would almost like vacuum it off. They'd suck it off your hand. They would eat the shrimp off your hand like a vacuum. You see right there? That fish right now is a tarpon. These are very large fish. They can be 5 feet, 6 feet. And I had to figure out the right timing of feeding them because as you would put the fish out there, if it's a slow release shrimp, for example, they might take my whole arm. So I had to really release the fish very quickly or the shrimp very quickly so that the tarpon didn't make mistake the shrimp and my arm for food. But if I threw it too early, other fish would eat it. So I had to find the exact balance for releasing the shrimp for the tarpon to eat so that they didn't also get my arm with it. The next step in my career was the PhD going to Oregon State University. I know all the way on the West Coast. There we focused on two projects, one being the sea star wasting disease, which was really having a large impact during the year 2014 and 2015. This is where this disease was an epidemic for sea stars, and they were just really melting away. Their body was disintegrating. And we were trying to count how bad the disease was spreading, what was causing it. And we were finding a specific virus in the ocean water that was causing this. And the virus was spreading because, again, climate change and rising temperature waters getting warmer. Viruses really love raising temperatures. And so they were spreading very quickly to all the sea stars. And the sea stars were wasting away. Here's an image. Have you done this before? I do it all the time. I hate when seaweed touches my leg. Can't stand it underwater. I get scared. But when I did my PhD, I decided, okay, maybe I need to try and studying this organism because I'm so scared of it. Maybe it will make me less scared of it. So my work was every day I would get up at 3 or 4 in the morning during low tide when the water was pulling out towards the ocean. It would expose a lot more of land, and we would walk down on that exposed land and just study the seaweed that was there. Meaning we would figure out what species were present, how much of each species was present, and were they changing over time due to climate change. On the left, you can see photosynthesis chamber, which was measuring how much oxygen the seaweed was producing, which tells us how healthy the seaweed is. And that's when, well, before that, I had started doing a lot of field work, right? I was working in fields, and this is when I started focusing a little bit more on data analysis, coding, and how to use numbers to create visuals, to visualize information to help people understand what is happening in the water. You may wonder what coding really looks like, and this is kind of what it looks like for me. There's a lot of words and phrases that produce graphs and charts, and at the bottom, you see a figure here, a graph, showing results from all that input language and all those numbers. So upon completing my PhD, I decided I wanted to do a postdoc, which is like doing a short term, it's a short time where you have some added training, research, you get, it adds on to your college degree. So I decided to go to the University of California, Santa Barbara, sometimes called UCSB, where again, I was studying kelp forests. Again, because it's the West Coast and this is just a really, really prevalent species on the West Coast. My job was to look at all the kelp forests along the coast of California and see which areas seemed healthiest and which areas seemed least healthy, meaning there was less kelp or it was degrading for some reason. And then I tried to figure out why that was happening and make maps so that I could show the areas that were doing great and the areas that weren't doing great and how we could restore or bring kelp back to health in those suffering areas. Finally, I found myself where I am today, which is UNH in Durham. So it's really close to Maine, really close to the border. I work by the ocean. My job right now, maybe you're familiar with this location, maybe not. Well, one of the largest estuaries in New England is located here called Great Bay Estuary. It touches the border of both New Hampshire and Maine waters. And you can see on the right in the yellow dots, those are all areas where scientists are going to sample water and to study what's going on within the estuary. My job specifically is to take all the data, collect all the data, look at it, and see what seems to be happening within the waters. Are they changing over time because of climate change? And then I try to figure out within all these sites where people go, do we need all those sites? Can we reduce the number of sites, but collect the same amount of information? Or do we need to add other sites to other areas and start monitoring those areas? So that's what I'm doing at my work currently. In addition, I'm starting to wrap up due to time, but in addition, all the research I do, my path through marine ecology and statistics is not the only thing I do. I also do something on the side. It's a passion project of mine where I foster STEM communication for the public. So me and a friend, we decided to co-found a nonprofit organization called Atomic Hands. And the mission of Atomic Hands is to produce and share, communicate STEM information to help people become more curious and to reinvigorate interest in STEM again. A lot of people don't love STEM for different reasons, and we want to bring it back, make it fun again, and make STEM come to life. If you look at our website, you can see a lot of the content we've produced. There's videos and different content on different topics. Some of them are fun facts, short videos. Some are longer videos explaining a little bit more in depth about maybe things you see everyday life, STEM things you don't even realize you're encountering. Or we might explain different environmentally friendly activities or behaviors you can start changing your own behaviors every day to be a little bit more environmentally friendly. So these videos we like to explain about famous deaf STEMists who existed in the past or currently, such as Thomas Edison. I don't know if you know, Thomas Edison was deaf. A lot of people don't know that. So we like to explain about Thomas Edison and the work he did. And so we spotlight a lot of deaf STEMists. We also like to show different ASL content and materials. We produce things in ASL. Not just for people who know ASL. You don't have to be familiar with American Sign Language to watch these. We have English captions, and a lot of people who don't know American Sign Language still watch these videos and enjoy them because sometimes when people are signing in ASL, it gives a more visual approach to information, which a lot of people find beneficial in addition to reading captions or hearing information. We also have a deaf STEMist network on our website where different deaf STEMists who are doing really cool work throughout the country or in the world can keep in touch and share information. things that they're observing, what kind of work people are doing out there, where they are, and opportunities to chat with them. So please take advantage of these opportunities on our website. I think that will wrap it up for me today. And now I'll let the participants in this workshop today ask any questions, any burning questions.
Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions for Barbara, please throw them into the chat and we'll read them off to her. Um, Also, well, while we're waiting, I have a question for you, which is, what's your favorite part about your job right now?
Hmm. I think I love having questions that no one knows the answer to and feeling like I invite those challenges. I like those challenges. I like trying to figure out answers to questions that no one knows the answer to. I also like working with people and having and sharing different perspectives and working together to solve problems that exist in nature. So we can all enjoy this place together.
That's great. Yeah, working together as a community is definitely really important for us moving into the future and addressing big issues like climate change that I know a lot of us are thinking about. Okay, we have some questions from students and viewers. One is, have you ever experienced red tides?
And we've just swapped interpreters, so it's a new voice, but here's Barbara. So here in New England, we do see red tides. I've seen it a lot in Florida as well. Red or brown tides are typical. It is unfortunate because it can harm a lot of marine life. And of course, we can't swim. And when that's happening, it's not safe for us to swim. There are a lot of research efforts trying to figure out the cause of red tides and why that event seems to be happening more and more often in recent years, and what kind of effect that might have on the marine life if it's happening more and more often, and if it's happening for longer periods instead of just appearing for a short while and disappearing again. I think last year we did have a really bad one by an organism called tripos. And so we were trying to figure out what what mysterious effects it might have. I had mentioned before the estuaries and the different sites that scientists go to. So we actually recently added um, red and brown tide areas where that happens within the estuary to see if it is the same experience that happens in the ocean and the estuary or if they are different.
Pretty cool. We have another question from, I believe this is coming from Piscataquis, and they're asking, how have you already accomplished so much when you seem so young?
I'm not that young. Maybe that's an issue of perspective, but I'm 36 at this point. Um, I do feel like these accomplishments are worth recognizing, but that they haven't happened without difficulty. And the journey was tough and full of a lot of challenges and frustrating moments. And of course, you don't see all of those moments in these slides talking about accomplishments, but I do think it's important to recognize that sometimes people's paths aren't easy. And it's not like a singular path. So, me as a deaf person as well, I have a unique set of challenges in managing and moving through a hearing world. I've experienced some discrimination, of course, and some other things that have come up. But if you're really passionate about something and you really want to do something, you can find a way to do it one way or another. It's important, I think. I've become comfortable with being uncomfortable. So if there's a new experience for you, or you're around new people or in a new place, try to be open to the opportunities that might be there, even if it feels uncomfortable. And a support system has really made a big impact on my life. I mentioned at the beginning that mentor was really impactful for me. I've had mentors that have really helped me on my path. And as I've moved to new jobs and new places and new college experiences, I really do rely on my family and friends, because being in a new place can feel scary and can feel lonely. So you need to have some people around you that you can get support from and you can vent to, um, so that you can get to the place that you always wanted to be.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's really impressive how many different places you've worked and all of the degrees that all the research that you've done. Um, it is very, very cool to hear about. We have another question coming from Jacob, which is, have you ever seen an octopus?
I've only seen two, actually. I've only seen them twice. When you do see them in person, it's really amazing. They can fit into such small places. They can squish their body into such small places that often you don't notice them. They can also camouflage themselves. Ironically, the two times I've seen them were at night. I was doing night dives, and it was really dark in the water, and I was using a flashlight to move through the water and try to see things. It's a little scary to dive at night because the only thing you see is that space where your flashlight light is. The rest around you is completely black. But I happened to put my flashlight where an octopus was. So that was really cool. You know, it was doing its own thing. It was catching fish and eating, but if you have an opportunity, I think you should go ahead and look for them, or go to an aquarium. Often they're there and nice to see.
I heard I used to go to the New England Aquarium a lot. I went to a summer camp there once, and they told me that the octopus there snuck out of the tank one time. Do you know if you've heard anything like that before?
No, I hadn't heard that. But I'm honestly not surprised because they are such intelligent creatures. So, you know, they're in their tank and they probably got bored. They want to go out exploring.
They can be sneaky, those octopus.
They definitely can. Okay, and one more question is, what was your favorite spot to study? Probably a hard one.
Hmm. It depends, I think. Everyone would think the coral reef because it's beautiful. There's so many different animals there, but that wasn't actually my favorite place. I think I'm going to go with two. I would say the rocky intertidal areas on the West Coast. Oregon has one of the most beautiful tidal systems. So if you have a chance to go, I really suggest you go to the coast and check it out. There's so much, so many different seaweed species. There's so many different animals. There's so many things that are small and easy to overlook. You have to know exactly where to look. So you have to spend some time and really, really look, and then you'll get a lot. There's some hidden gems in those areas. It's sort of like those books, the I Spy books, if you remember those. You have to look, or you look for specific animals or books. The I Spy book will say like, oh, there's a ball somewhere on this page, and you have to look and look and look to actually find it. That feels similar to some of the areas there. And I would say my postdoc in California, that was my first um, real exposure to diving in kelp forests, and it was an incredible place to be. It's a completely different world underwater there. You're really swimming through a forest. It looks and feels like a forest. It feels unreal. It's like a huge forest on land is underwater. It's pretty crazy. So in if you're in a forest on land, you might see a wolf or a bear. If you're underwater, often you're going to see seals within the kelp forest. And their seals are very curious animals. They sort of pop up and they stick their out at you and are kind of like, "Hey, what are you doing? What's going on over here?" So, the those ecosystems that I mentioned are pretty cool.
We get a lot of seals here off the coast of Maine too. I see them a lot right off the dock here in Portland. They're very exciting. But I've always wanted to see the kelp forest out west too. All right. Well,
Yeah, I did want to add, even though I've mentioned the West, I have done some diving in and around Maine. And there are some incredible things underwater out of the coast of Maine. If you go near Pillings, you'll see a lot of anemone.
And nudibranches.
Yeah, those. So if you have an opportunity, those are here in Maine. Maine has a lot to offer as well.
Yeah, a lot of those organisms cling to the pilings.
yeah, we see a lot of nudibranchs around up around mid-coast and in Acadia as well. I think I've seen some in Portland, but they're a little bit further north.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess I have one more question for you, which I know that you've traveled a lot, you've done a lot of research in a lot of different places. Do you see yourself staying in New Hampshire for the foreseeable future? Do you have other adventures on the horizon?
I don't know New Hampshire specifically, but New England does feel like home. I love living in New England for several reasons. One, I love that there's actually four seasons here. I do like the change that we get to see throughout the year. And I have family and friends that are here in and around New England. And the scientists that are doing research here are doing really amazing things. There's a lot of collaboration between states here in this area and to preserve our waterways. And there's a lot of opportunities to interact and work with different people and different scientists and to be involved in some of the larger efforts so that everyone can enjoy our oceans. So I would definitely love to stay in New England if I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Barbara. This was really incredible to hear about all of your research and to hear about the work that you're doing at the Atomic Hands as well. I'll make sure to include a link to your website for that in the email that goes out. But thank you everyone for joining. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you at a future Sciences to Go.
Thank you.